I'm 42, and I used to think I understood the basic math of my life. Work plus home plus kids equals future. Add patience, subtract ego, carry the mortgage. Show up. Do the dishes. Kiss the heads goodnight. That math carried me longer than I realized. Then, one ordinary Thursday, in a kitchen that smelled like burnt toast and lemon dish syrup, the numbers stopped adding up. She didn't say, "I don't love you." She didn't say divorce. She said she needed a pause. A pause. Like we were a podcast she could tap with her thumb and set aside until later. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, eyes steady the way you look at an animal you were trying not to spook, and she said she needed time to figure out who she was, what she wanted, where this thing had gone off track. The part of me that knows how to deal with emergencies, the part that knows where the fire extinguisher is and how to jump a dead battery reached for a wrench I didn't have. How do you tighten a pause? What bolt do you turn on an invisible problem? I made coffee we didn't drink. I said words I don't remember. I think I told her I understood. I didn't. What I understood was the sound of my own pulse in my ears, the way it got loud and then distant, like I was driving through a tunnel and the radio couldn't decide which station to play. After that, yoga became our third roommate. I don't have anything against yoga. Stretch your hamstrings, breathe into your ribcage, chase enlightenment in a pair of high-waisted leggings is fine. But yoga had a schedule now. Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes Saturday mornings. Then Sundays, special workshops. Then the workshops ran long. Then the parking was bad. Then there was tea afterward. And the glow that bothered me more than the schedule. Not sweat. Not effort. A glow like a secret with its own light source. I told myself not to be paranoid. She has a right to hobbies. She has a right to friends. If I mention the glow and the insecure husband who can't handle his wife doing something for herself, that's the voice I hear in my head around midnight when she's still not home. Don't be that guy. Don't be needy. The kids are asleep, do the dishes. Make tomorrow's lunches. Be useful. There's a trick you can do with your own brain where you avoid a thought so hard that you walk right into it. I wasn't snooping. That's the lie. I used the afternoon I picked up her phone to find the picture of our son's soccer goal, the one I promised to text to the grandparents. My thumb opened photos, and there it was, her face tilted into a shoulder I didn't recognize, a man's hand cupping her upper arm like he'd been invited to learn the map of it. Not a scandalous photo. If you were determined to be blind, you could call it tasteful. But nothing about it was neutral. Her eyes were closed in that picture. I can tell myself 1,000 things, but I know the look of surrender on my wife's face. I know when the current is running one way. I close the photo like I touched something hot. Put the phone down. Pick it up again. The world narrowed to the size of a 4-inch screen and a timeline. I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. That one frame was enough to move a piece inside me I didn't know was designed to move. People say your heart sinks. Mine didn't. It sank and kept sinking until it hit some floor I couldn't see and cracked a little on impact. You think the next move is heroism. Confrontation. Truth. Some movie version of me walking into the living room, holding up the phone and speaking with a clean, righteous voice. That's not what happened. What happened is I shut off the screen, slid the phone under a stack of mail, and went to preheat the oven for frozen lasagna because our daughter had piano at 5 and our son's science project volcano was still wet paint on the dining table. You can call it cowardice. I called it parenting. I called it keeping Thursday from exploding. We do these mental acrobatics because we're protecting something, and yes, I'm smart enough to say I was protecting the kids. But I was also protecting my story. My version of how we got here. The version where the cracks are hairline, cosmetic, fixable with a weekend of us time and a couple's workbook. I clung to that version like a man hanging from the last rung on a ladder, because dropping meant free fall, and free fall meant lawyers and schedules and kids packing weekend bags with toothbrushes and Ziplocs. So I waited. I watched. I made jokes about her becoming a pretzel. I asked how class was in a casual voice. She said good in a casual voice. She smelled like frankincense and peppermint oil and sometimes something I couldn't name, like heated dust. She wore the green leggings I liked and a sweatshirt that wasn't from our house. She looked lit from inside. I don't know if there's a nice way to say this. She looked like she had an audience. We had good days in there, which is the cruelest part. Breakfast on the porch with the sun finding the old water rings on the table, a shed smile over our daughter's bad knock-knock joke, an evening where we argued about nothing and laughed ourselves out of it in the laundry room. And then we had days where I was a ghost in my own life, moving through rooms carefully so I wouldn't knock anything down, because it felt like everything was already balancing on the thin edge of something sharp. I did the things people tell you to do. I suggested counseling. She said counseling sounded like we were admitting there was something to fix. I said maybe admitting it was the first step. She said maybe the first step was a pause. We weren't even arguing, we were reading from different manuals. I tried to plan a date night. She said she was tired. I joined a gym for exactly 3 weeks because the internet says endorphins help, and my knees say I'm not 22 anymore. I asked friends for advice and realized you can watch the respectful shutters come down behind people's eyes the second you say my wife and paused in the same sentence. One guy told me to check her location services. Another told me to grow a spine. A third said sometimes things just happen, as if marriages are weather systems you can't predict or steer. There are facts you don't admit out loud. Here's one. I started to imagine what it would be like to be a single dad. The routines, the silence, the meals, the small holidays, that would have to feel big. I did spreadsheets in my head about money. I counted beds. I thought about who would keep the dog and then felt stupid because the dog would be fine. I was the one picturing birthdays in split screen. The night everything shifted had no special lighting. No ominous music. It was 10:30. The house was down to a hush and the fridge had that sighing, steady hum. The dog was asleep, back legs twitching in some private chase. I had a headache that began behind my right eye and decided I deserved the Advil in her bag because mine was missing from the medicine cabinet. I didn't go looking for secrets. I went looking for relief. I opened her bag, and the smell of her perfume ghosted up vanilla and something warmer, like skin that's been in the sun. There was an envelope. Not a bill. Heady paper, not junk. My fingers knew before my eyes did. 2 plane tickets printed within the last 24 hours. A destination I know because we looked at it once on our couch, years ago, when we were the kind of people who said someday with certainty. I read the names out loud in a whisper that didn't feel like my voice. Harris, and a name I hadn't seen before but recognized. You can recognize a stranger if they've been renting space in your imagination long enough. I sat at the kitchen table with those tickets like I'd found a wrecked ship washed up in our house. I watched the minute hand on the stove clock stumble forward. I tried to breathe in a way that didn't hurt. My body kept offering me choices: break something, run, wake her up, pretend this is paperwork for conference. I drank water like it could flush out a truth this thick. It couldn't. Around midnight, a new voice showed up. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't cruel. It was clean. It said, "You've been living around the edge of this. Step into the center. You can love your kids and tell the truth. You can love your wife and stop being a stagehand for a play you didn't audition for." The next morning, she padded into the kitchen with that half-awake face I loved for a decade. She reached for the coffee mug with a small chip in the handle. She smiled like nothing was broken. I was suddenly very aware of how big the room was between us. I didn't raise the tickets over my head. I didn't slam them down. I just put them on the counter, open, names up like an offering. I said, quiet, steady, I won't cage you. If you're leaving, I won't stand in the doorway like a bad movie cliché. I will let you go. But you tell them. You tell our kids what's true. Not a story about yoga. You use the word that fits. Her mouth opened and closed, and then she did cry. The kind of cry that looks like relief wearing Grease coat. I understood then that my permission wasn't the gate opening, it was the last rope around her ankles coming loose. That stung in a place I didn't have a name for. We told the kids on a Sunday because I couldn't stomach the idea of them going to school after being hit by that kind of weather. Our daughter, 12, had the skeptical eyebrows I used to see in the mirror when I was a teenager and had learned to hear the weak spots in adult sentences. Our son, 8, still believed in magic as long as he could feel it under his hand. We sat on the couch nobody likes because the cushions slide and you have to keep scooting yourself back into place. Appropriate. I spoke first because I didn't want her to walk naked into this and I didn't want to push her into it either. I said our family was changing, but the part where we love them wasn't. I said grown-ups sometimes make mistakes and sometimes they discover truths they should have admitted earlier. I said we were going to live in 2 houses. I said I was still their dad every day, not just on days that end in Y. I ran out of words and passed them to her. She didn't dress it up. She did the thing I asked. She said she'd fallen in love with someone else. She said it like there was a pit in front of her and she was going to walk into it rather than make the kids do it. Our daughter's eyes flicked to me, assessing, is this true? Are you going to explode? Our son stared at the pattern in the rug like he could read it if he tried hard enough. We did not fix it in that hour. We did not tie a bow on pain. There were tears, and there was quiet, and there was a question nobody asked out loud, are we safe? And I answered it the only way I could. I scheduled life. I ordered a second set of everything. Toothbrushes, pajamas, soccer socks, step stool for the sink that's a little too tall so he can reach the faucet and a little too short so he'll still ask me to lift him sometimes. I didn't become a saint. I didn't become a monster. I became a man who puts 2 trash cans on the curb on Thursday and reads bedtime on nights that smell like laundry and grilled cheese. I became the dad who can braid a passable ponytail on a girl who pretends not to love that I still try. I became logistics and tired and okay. I learned the math of every other weekend. I learned how many minutes it takes to get from my house to his and how long to sit in the car so I don't look like I ran the last block or like I stopped to stretch. I learned to bring a book so I'm not scrolling shallowly when they come out with overstuffed backpacks and complicated expressions. The first time I saw him in daylight, I was picking up the kids from her driveway. He came around the side of the house carrying a bag of potting soil. He was exactly as average as I hoped and exactly as human as I feared. Not a villain's jawline. A man with a slightly too short haircut and shoulders that suggested he works out but not in a way that defines his personality. He put the bag down when he saw me, and we did the thing men do where we arrange our faces into neutral and nod once like we're confirming that we both exist. He didn't smirk. He didn't apologize. He looked like a person who has convinced himself that happiness erases certain debts. Maybe he's right about his life. He's not right about mine. I didn't hit him. I didn't even imagine successfully hitting him. I imagined how it would feel for my kids to see me do that to add one more kind of breakage to a house already short on glue. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, like I learned to do in a dark living room at 2 a.m. when the baby wouldn't sleep and the dog kept barking at nothing. I nodded. He nodded. He disappeared back around the corner, and I learned a new math, the number of nods you can survive. There were holidays. The first Thanksgiving, we split the day like he split a check, everyone pretending the division is fair and nobody pointing out that some dinners taste like forkfuls of memory. I discovered I like cooking turkey more than eating it. I discovered my son loves canned cranberry sauce in perfect ridged circles, while my daughter will only eat the homemade kind with orange zest and exactly 1 spoonful of sugar more than the recipe calls for. We invented new rituals where the old ones didn't fit. I let myself be sentimental only after they went to bed, when the house had that empty sound that a house gets when the heat turns off. You want to know if she took that flight? She didn't. Not that one. Not then. The tickets went unused. She cancelled them quietly and pretended I wouldn't notice, which is exactly the sort of middle-distance decision our marriage was dying of. She didn't cancel because she recommitted to us. She cancelled because saying the words to the kids took something out of the fancy. I get it. Secrets look best under dim light. Truth has fluorescent bulbs. Still, there were other trips. Different destinations. Different weekends when I learned the exact weight of the door when I close it behind my kids and stand in a kitchen that looks like my life but doesn't quite fit. People ask me how I'm doing, and I tell them I'm fine because that's the passcode to get out of those conversations. The honest answer is I'm learning how to live with a draft. You know how a window can look closed, but you feel a thin line of cold air running across your skin. That's my life now. Every room has one. I didn't tell my parents right away. They live 3 time zones away and got very good at believing my version of the story. When I told them, my mother made the sound mothers make when their child is in pain and their hands are empty. My father went quiet and then asked if I needed money. It was his version of a hug. I said no. He sent it anyway. It showed up as a deposit labeled simply for whatever, and I stared at the notification on my phone until my eyes went blurry because there are some gifts that feel like apologies for things the giver can't name. I tried therapy. I sat in a chair that has held 100 other broken people and told a stranger that I didn't know if I was angry or sad or just tired, and maybe those are the same thing when you layer them on top of each other long enough. The therapist asked good questions and sometimes terrible ones. She asked what I was afraid of. I said losing my kids. She asked what I was ashamed of. I said not seeing what was in front of me. She asked what I wanted now. I said to be the kind of man my kids are proud to introduce at their future weddings. It felt silly to say it, but I meant it with my whole chest. I also did stupid things. I googled the other man, and then I googled him again. I studied his LinkedIn like it could tell me why my life had a hole in it with his shit. I looked at one of his old marathon photos and thought, of course. Of course there's a medal. Of course there's a finish line. Then I hated myself for being petty. Then I didn't. I drove past their yoga studio once and sat in the car until the windows fogged while people in better leggings than mine walked in and out, laughing. I imagined going in, signing the waiver, dropping into the first down dog of my life, and looking at the ceiling while the instructor told us to release what no longer serves us. I imagined laughing out loud in a quiet room full of other people's breathing. I drove home instead and cleaned the microwave. There's a conversation I have with myself in the laundry room that I want to put on record. I was folding a towel that won't die, it's older than our marriage, I think, and I heard my voice say, clear and almost kind, what if you stopped asking who ruined the house and started asking what kind of house you want to live in now? I stood there, towel in my hands, and counted to 10. It wasn't an answer. It was a permission slip to ask different questions. Not why her, not why him, but what next? And who do I need to be on purpose, not by default? So I started doing small, ridiculous things that felt like nothing and ended up feeling like scaffolding. I fixed the hinge on the cabinet that always squeaked. I labeled the bins in the garage with actual words instead of the guess and pray system I'd used for years. I bought new sheets because I decided soft sheets are a kind of dignity. I took the kids to a movie and didn't look at my phone once and then told them the truth when they asked if I was lonely. I said sometimes. I said it passes. I said it's like weather. I also listened. To my daughter, trying on sarcasm and strength like new clothes, testing which ones fit. To my son, whose questions about the universe come streaking at me sideways. Do fish know they're wet? Does the sky end? Does love? We had a late-night conversation on the living room floor where he asked, "Are you mad at Mom?" And I said, "Sometimes." And he said, "Are you mad at me?" And I said, "Never." And something inside me unclenched that had been clenched since the day she said pause. I realized I'd been bracing for them to hate me for not being enough. Kids are strange and relentless truth-tellers. They didn't. People love a redemption arc. They want to know if we got back together. We didn't. We became better co-parents than we ever were spouses at the end. We learned the choreography of the handoff in the driveway and the text that says he forgot his cleats and the calendar invites labeled not with our names but with the kids' sleepovers and dentist appointments. We learned how to stand near each other at school concerts without setting off the sprinklers. I kept my promise about the truth. I didn't weaponize it. I didn't make the kids carry it like a heavy box. I didn't sanitize it either. When they asked hard questions, I'd use short sentences and the right nouns. Yes, she loves someone else. No, that doesn't mean you're less loved. No, you don't have to choose. Yes, I'm okay. Not always. Enough. I never said the word affair to them. I didn't need to. They're smarter than both of us on our best days. There was, however, one person I realized I hadn't told the truth to. Nay. Because underneath the righteous part of my head, underneath the clean line where she did the thing you don't do if there was a murky layer I didn't want to touch. I had checked out too. Not with a person. With a posture. I'd been the man who shows up, sure, but also the man who hides incompetence. The man who does dishes instead of asking his wife why she's lonely. The man who can recite the kid's favorite snacks but couldn't tell you the last time he really saw the person across the table without filtering her through a to-do list. That's not an excuse for her choices. It's an indictment of mine. 2 different crimes, same victim. Months after the Sunday on the couch, I found myself at the airport picking up the kids from a trip with their mom to see our parents. Airports are liminal spaces. Everyone is leaving or arriving, and nobody is where they actually live. I watched people hug with their whole bodies, watched a soldier stand at the escalator and spot his family like you spot the horizon after the fog lifts, watched a woman in heels walk fast like someone whose heart is somewhere in the baggage carousel. I thought about this and used plane tickets and understood something that hadn't had a shape before. The trip she didn't take wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal was the life that had already left before the flight. The flight would have just put a stamp in a passport already full. I drove home with the kids asleep in the back seat, their heads heavy and warm, their mouths open just enough to let out the small, honest sounds sleeping kids make. At a red light, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and tried out a sentence. I said it out loud because sometimes the body needs to hear the thing. I'm not a victim. I'm a man who made choices, and some were good, and some were small, and some were too late. It didn't feel heroic. It felt solid, like a floor you can step on without testing it first. If you need the twist, it's this. The line I drew, I'll let you go. But you tell the kids the truth, it wasn't a sentence I gave her. It was the first sentence I gave myself. It was me choosing the kind of father I wanted to be over the kind of husband I used to pretend I was. It was the point where I realized I can lose a marriage and still win the person my kids come to when life scares them. I can break a story and still keep the facts that matter. There's a small, stubborn grace in admitting you weren't brave until you had to be. That you slept through alarms your heart kept setting and only woke up when the house filled with smoke. Even then, you didn't sprint out, you walked the kids down the stairs, checked every room, came back for the dog, grabbed the photographs. That's how this felt. Not like a clean escape. Like making sure everyone had shoes on before we stepped out into the cold. I still think about the photos sometimes, the one with her head on a stranger's shoulder. Not to punish myself or her. To remember the shape of a moment when something true announces itself, and you get to decide what kind of person you're in the next 5 minutes. I wasn't a hero in that kitchen. I wasn't a hero on that couch. But I did one thing that keeps paying interest. I chose honesty over theater. I decided our kids weren't going to learn about love from the way we pretended. They were going to learn from the way we told the truth and then did the work the truth required. If I'm honest, I still have nights where I miss the old math. The neatness. The sense that you could solve for X with enough patience and a decent pen. But there's a new kind of arithmetic now. 2 houses. 4 sets of sheets. 1 dog who doesn't care who has the better yard as long as someone throws a tennis ball. 2 kids who know the difference between silence and peace, and who understand that adults can love them ferociously while failing each other. Every so often, I catch myself at the sink after dinner, hands in soapy water, and I realize I'm smiling. Not because I'm happy all the time, I'm not. Because I survived a moment I thought would empty me out, and instead it made a larger container. When my son asks if love ends, I tell him it changes shape. When my daughter asks if I'm dating, I tell her I'm learning to be someone worth dating. When people I barely know ask me what happened, I say, we told the truth and it cost what it cost. At the end of the day, that's the only vow I can still recite without flinching. Not the one about forever. The one I made later, when the house was quiet and the kitchen light made a little halo on the floor. I promised myself I would choose the hard honesty over the easy fiction. I promised I would not outsource my courage to my kids or make them carry my version of events. And I promised I would not let my worst hour decide the headline of my life. So here it is. If you need the headline, a man let go. He didn't mistake the door for the home. He loved his children more than he loved his pride. He learned that pause is sometimes just another word for done, and that you can either spend your life hitting play on a story that doesn't fit, or you can write a new chapter with all the messy, beautiful, honest ink you've got left. And if you need a provocation to argue about over coffee, try this one. The opposite of betrayal is infidelity, it's transparency. Nobody ever stayed married because they never felt anything for anyone else. People stay, or they leave, based on how much truth they can stand to live with. I couldn't live with lies anymore, hers or mine. So I chose the one thing that didn't need permission. I said, I'll let you go. But you say the words to them yourself. Tell them the truth. She did. And in the oddest, most crooked mercy of my life, that's the day I finally told it to myself.